There are some doors in life you spend years pretending don't exist. You walk past them. You tell yourself the dust on the handle is proof that nothing inside matters. And then one morning, somebody hands you a key, and you realize the door wasn't waiting for you. You were waiting for the door. I was 18 years old, 2 weeks out of foster system, sleeping in the back seat of a 1997 Buick I'd bought for $400 in cash, when a man in a charcoal suit told me my father had left me a storage unit on the south end of Marion County, and nothing else. Not the house, not the truck, not the 43 acres of bottomland my grandfather had cleared by hand back in 1962. Just Unit B, 14 at Cedar Ridge Self-Storage, paid up to the end of the year, and a brass key on a leather fob that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and motor oil. If you've ever been the one nobody planned for, the kid who showed up in the family photograph by accident, the one who got the leftover plate at Thanksgiving, then you already know what that meeting felt like. You already know the silence in the room when the lawyer reads out everyone else's name and skips yours, and how loud your own breathing gets, and how the wood grain on the table starts to look like a map of somewhere you'd rather be. This is the story of what was inside that unit. It's the story of a man I've been taught my whole life to be ashamed of, and a piece of land my father's second wife sold 3 weeks before the will was even read. It's the story of a sealed envelope with my name on it, written in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 7 years old. And what happened the morning I finally walked into that small-town courthouse and laid the contents on the county recorder's desk. If you stay with me, I think you might find a piece of your own story here too. Because every family has a door somebody is hoping you'll never open. And every now and then, every once in a great while, the one who is given the least is given the only key that matters. Part 1. The crisis in the H unit in Section 1. The boy who was never counted. My father's name was Dale Whitlock. He died on a Tuesday in late September of a heart attack in the cab of his pickup, half a mile from the back fence line of the farm his own father had cleared. He was 56 years old. The man at the gas station who found him said he'd already been gone an hour by the time anybody noticed the truck idling. Dale had been on his way out to the back 40 to check a culvert. That was the kind of man he was. The culvert mattered. The drainage mattered. The land mattered. Whether or not his son knew he was loved, that, apparently, had never made the list. I want to be careful how I tell you about him, because I spent 10 years of my life hating him, and I owe it to the truth to tell you why, and I owe it to him to tell you what came after. My mother, Ruth, married Dale when she was 22. He was 30. They had me a year later. She died of an aneurysm when I was 4 years old in the kitchen in front of me while she was making oatmeal. I don't remember the day clearly. I remember the smell of burnt oats. I remember the linoleum, which was yellow with a pattern of small green flowers. I remember a woman in a uniform putting a blanket over my shoulders and sitting with me on the back porch while men I didn't know carried something out of my mother's house. After that, my memories get patchy for a long time. What I do remember is this. My father, 3 years later, married a woman named Lenora Whitlock, formerly Lenora Briggs, who came out of Tipton County with 2 boys of her own, Trent and Jaden, ages 11 and 9. Lenora was beautiful in a hard, polished way. She had a laugh that sounded like coins dropping into a glass jar. She wore lipstick to feed the chickens. And from the day she walked into that farmhouse, she made it clear in 1,000 small ways that I was a problem she was being asked to solve. You don't need me to draw you the picture. The plate on the counter when everybody else's was on the table. The Christmas list with 3 names on it instead of 4. The school clothes from the church barrel, while her sons got new boots from the farm and ranch store in town. I learned by about age 9 to stop asking for things, because asking was the worst part. Asking made you feel it. But the part one want you to understand, the part that took me years to see, is that my father wasn't oblivious. He saw all of it. He just didn't fight her on it. Dale Whitlock was a man who would walk into a hailstorm, pull a calf out of a ditch, and never say a word about his bad knee. But he could not, for the life of him, stand up to his second wife inside his own kitchen. I think he loved her. I think he was afraid of her. I think he believed, in some quiet farmer's way that I didn't understand until much later, that as long as the land stayed in the family, the rest would somehow shake out. He was wrong. He was wrong about almost all of it. But he was right about the land, in the end, in a way that none of them ever expected. What he did do, and I want you to remember this, because it matters later, is he taught me the farm. From the time I could walk, I was the one out in the field with him. Trent and Jaden hated the dirt. They were town kids in their bones, and Lenora made sure they stayed that way. But Dale would put me up on the bench seat of his truck before sunrise, and we'd drive the fence line, and he would point at things and name them. He showed me how the soil ran black in the bottoms and red up on the rise. He showed me where the spring came out of the limestone behind the cattle barn, and how the water tasted different there than it did anywhere else on the property. He taught me which fields drained and which ones held water in a wet year. He taught me how to read a deed. He taught me how to read a plat map. He taught me how to walk a property line with a compass and 100-foot tape and a roll of pink ribbon. He never said I love you, not once that I can recall. But he taught me the land like he was handing me a language nobody else in the family could speak. And one summer when I was 12, he took me out to Back 40, the piece my grandfather Otis had cleared in '62, and he stood at the corner post and looked at me for a long time. And he said, "Whatever else happened, son, you remember whose hands cleared this. You remember it was Whitlock hands. You don't ever let anybody tell you different." I didn't understand then that he was already preparing me for something. He died when I was 17 and a half. I had 6 months left in foster placement. The state had moved me there at age 15, after an incident I'm not going to describe in detail, except to say that Lenora finally pushed too hard, and I pushed back, and a teacher saw the marks, and a caseworker showed up at the school the next morning with a folder and a kind, tired face. My father didn't fight the placement. That was the thing that broke me. He didn't fight it. He paid the support order. He sent a card on my birthday with $20 in it, and he let the state take me. I told myself, every night for 2.5 years in 3 different group homes, that he had chosen her over me, that he had stood at the door and watched me leave and gone back inside to eat dinner. I aged out at 18. 2 weeks later, I got the letter from a lawyer named Hollis Tremblay, calling me to a will reading. I almost didn't go. I want you to know that. I sat in the parking lot of a Waffle House outside Bloomington for 40 minutes with the engine running, trying to decide. The only reason I went, in the end, was that some stubborn part of me wanted Lenora to have to look at me one more time. I wanted her to have to sit in a room with the boys she'd tried to erase and acknowledge that I existed. That, it turned out, was a luxury she had no intention of granting me. Before I take you into that lawyer's office, I want to ask you something. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I read every one, because stories like this one, stories about the kid who got left behind, about the families that have a door somebody hopes you never open, these stories are everywhere, and I think most of us are carrying one. Tell me yours. Now, let me tell you about Hollis Tremblay's office. Section 2, the reading. The office was on the second floor of a brick building on the courthouse square in Linton, Indiana. The kind of small county seat where the clock on the courthouse runs 3 minutes fast and has for 40 years and nobody has the heart to fix it. Hollis Tremblay was a thin, bald man in his late 60s, with watery blue eyes behind rimless glasses and a way of clearing his throat before every other sentence. His office smelled of old carpet and pipe tobacco. He had a framed law school diploma from 1977 on the wall and a fly fishing print and nothing else. Lenore was already there when I walked in. She was wearing black, but the kind of black that was more about being seen than about mourning. A tailored dress, pearls, hair freshly done. She had aged in the 2.5 years since I'd seen her, but she'd aged the way money ages. Trent and Jaden were on either side of her. Trent was 25 now, working at a bank in Indianapolis. Soft around the middle, watery-eyed like a man who'd been crying for show. Jaden was 23, harder, leaner, with his mother's tight mouth. None of them looked at me when I walked in. Lenora's eyes flicked over me once and dismissed me, the way you dismiss a delivery person who had wandered into the wrong room. There was a fourth person at the table I didn't recognize, a man in his 40s in a cheap brown suit, with a face like a deflating balloon. Hollis introduced him as Mr. Pate, representing a development company called Heartland Acreage Holdings. He had a manila folder open in front of him and a pen in his hand. I sat down at the end of the table. Hollis cleared his throat and began. He read through the will the way you'd read a grocery list. the farmhouse and the 4-acre home parcel, to Lenora in fee simple, the 1968 Chevy and the 2014 Ram pickup, to Trent, the base boat and the back pasture cabin, to Jaden, the remaining acreage, the working farm, all 146 acres of it, including my grandfather's back 40, was, the will stated, to be disposed of as my surviving spouse Lenora Whitlock sees fit, with the proceeds to be divided equally among my surviving children Trent Briggs Whitlock and Jaden Briggs Whitlock. Then Hollis cleared his throat one more time and said, and to my son, Caleb Otis Whitlock, I leave the content of Storage Unit B 14 at Cedar Ridge Self-Storage, Linton, Indiana, paid through December 31st of this year, along with my personal blessing and the wish that he find in it what I was unable to give him in life. That was it. That was the whole bequest. I remember the silence after he read it. I remember Lenora's hand very slowly going up to touch her pearls. I remember Trent making a small sound in his throat that might have been a laugh he'd tried to swallow. I remember Jaden looking directly at me for the first time in 3 years and giving me a small, tight smile, the kind man gives when he's just won a hand of cards. And I remember Lenora's voice, then, low and warm and pitched for the room. Well, she said, I think Dale was being generous, all things considered. Caleb hasn't been part of this family for some time. Mr. Pate, the development man, cleared his throat, said something about being sorry to intrude on a family matter, and slid a piece of paper across the table to Hollis. Mrs. Whitlock and I have an agreement in principle, he said, for the sale of the agricultural acreage. We were hoping to finalize before the end of the month. I looked at the paper. I couldn't read the numbers from where I sat, but I could read the date on the offer letter. It was dated 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. My father had been in the ground for 4. Lenora hadn't waited for the funeral flowers to wilt. She'd already sold the farm. I want to tell you that I made a scene. I want to tell you that I stood up, that I demanded an explanation, that I made Lenora say out loud with witnesses what she had done. I didn't. I sat there. I felt the heat come up the back of my neck, and I felt my hands go cold on my knees under the table, and I sat there. Something my father had said to me once, a long time ago, came back. You don't show your hand at the table, son. You wait for the river card. You always wait for the river card. He'd been talking about poker. He'd been talking about a lot of things. I realize now, when Hollis finished, he stood up and shook my hand and gave me the brass key on the leather fob and a copy of the will and a small white envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. He left this for you separately, he said. Asked that I give it to you only after the will was read, in private if possible. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket. I did not open it in front of them. On my way out, Lenora called my name. I stopped in the doorway and looked back. She was smiling, the small, polite smile of a woman who has won and has a charitable thought to share about it. Caleb, she said, I hope you understand. Your father wasn't himself toward the end. He'd had some health issues. The will was finalized over a year ago, when his judgment was clearer. I hope you find something nice in that storage unit. Maybe an old guitar or some of his hunting things. He was thinking of you. I didn't answer her. I closed the door behind me and walked down the stairs and out into the courthouse square. The clock on the courthouse said 3:57. It was actually 3:54. I sat on a bench under a maple tree and held the brass key and the white envelope, and I did not open either one. Not yet. Section 3. The drive out. I'd like to tell you that I drove straight to Cedar Ridge Self-Storage. I didn't. I drove to a county park about 6 miles east of Linton, a little pull-off above the river that my father used to take me to when I was small. I sat on the hood of the Buick, and I watched the water for a long time. The leaves were just starting to turn. There were 2 men fishing on the far bank, a boy with them, maybe 10 years old, holding a stringer of bluegill. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think it's the part most stories skip. I felt small. I felt like a fraud. I felt like I'd been carrying a story about myself my whole life. The boy who got left behind, the boy whose father chose her, and the will reading had just confirmed in the most public, legally documented way possible. A storage unit. While Trent got the base boat, while Jaden got the cabin, while Lenora got the farm and was already in the process of converting 146 acres of bottomland, including my grandfather's back 40, into a check. I sat on that hood for 2 hours. The sun started to go down. The men on the far bank packed up and left, and the boy waved at me as they walked past, for no reason except that he was 10 years old and the world hadn't yet taught him not to. I took the white envelope out of my pocket, and I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded in thirds, with my father's blocky, careful handwriting filling about 2/3 a page. "Caleb," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have just sat through what I expect was a humiliating hour of your life. I am sorry for that. There was a way to do this that would have spared you, and I did not take it. I took the way that I thought would protect what you have a right to. You will have to trust me on this for a little while longer. Go to the storage unit. The key opens the door. Inside, on top of the workbench against the back wall, there is a brown accordion file. Read what's in it before you do anything else. Read it twice. Then, only then, drive out of Otis's old corner, the back 40, the southeast post, and walk the line the way I taught you. If you do these things in this order, you will understand what I could not say to you in life. I could not say it because of what they would have done if I had. I am sorry, son. I love you. I have always loved you. I was a coward in many ways, but I was not a coward about this. Whatever you do, do not show the contents of the accordion file to Hollis Tremblay. He is a good man, but he is their lawyer, and he does not know. Go to the county recorder, a woman named Marlene Sayers. Tell her you are Otis Whitlock's grandson. She will help you. Dad." I read it 3 times. Then I started the Buick, and I drove to Cedar Ridge Self-Storage. It was almost full dark by the time I got there. Cedar Ridge was a long row of corrugated metal units behind a chain-link fence on the edge of town between the grain elevator and an auto body shop. The man at the gate was a heavy-set fellow with a beard and a coffee mug, watching a small television in the office. I gave him the unit number and the name on the contract. He looked it up, nodded, buzzed me through, and said, "Your dad was a good customer. Sorry for your loss." It was the first kind thing anyone had said to me in 3 weeks. Unit B. 14 was at the end of the second row. The door was a roll-up corrugated thing with a padlock on the latch. The brass key fit the padlock. The padlock had been recently oiled. I could feel it in the way it turned. The door rolled up with a clatter that echoed off the units across the way. I found a light switch on the inside wall. A single bare bulb came on overhead. The unit was about 10 feet wide and 20 feet deep. It was clean. That was the first thing that struck me. There was no dust on anything. The floor had been swept. The contents had been arranged with a kind of careful, deliberate order that was unmistakably my father's. Every tool in its place, every box labeled in his blocky black marker handwriting. Against the left wall, my mother's hope chest, the one I remembered from the foot of her bed. On top of it, a stack of cardboard banker's boxes labeled Ruth, Caleb baby, Caleb school, photos, do not mix. Against the right wall, a workbench. On the workbench, a brown accordion file, exactly where the letter had said it would be. Next to it, a small green steel safe about the size of a microwave with a combination dial and a brass plate that said Century. On top of the safe, a single sheet of paper with 1 line of handwriting on it. Combination is your mother's birthday, day, month, year, 4 digits each. Against the back wall, leaning up like it was waiting for me, a rolled-up surveyor's plat map in a clear plastic tube. Next to it, my grandfather Otis's old surveyor's transit in its leather case. The same transit I'd seen Otis carry on his shoulder in a photograph that used to hang in the kitchen before Lenora had taken it down. I stood in the doorway, and I did not move for what felt like a long time. The bulb overhead hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. The air in the unit smelled of pipe tobacco and motor oil, the same smell as the leather fob, the same smell I associated all the way down at the bottom of my memory with my father's hands when he came in from the field. I closed the door behind me. I sat down on an overturned milk crate in front of the workbench. I pulled the accordion file across the bench, and I untied the elastic, and I opened it. And the floor of my world, the one I had been standing on my whole life, gave way underneath me. Part 2. The Masterclass article in Section 4. The file. I am going to walk you through what was in that accordion file. The way I went through it that night. Because I want you to feel what I felt. The slow, dawning, almost unbearable understanding of how thoroughly my father had been preparing for this. The first folder was labeled, in his handwriting, Deed, Back 40, Otis, 1962. Inside was the original deed to the Back 40. The 40-acre parcel that my grandfather Otis Whitlock had cleared by hand in 1962. The piece my father had walked me to when I was 12. The deed had been recorded in Marion County on April 11th, 1962. It was on cream-colored paper with a county seal stamped in red ink. The grantee on the deed was Otis Lee Whitlock, a single man. Not married, not jointly, just Otis. The second folder was labeled Deed, Back 40, Transfer 1989. Inside was a quitclaim deed, dated June 8, 1989, transferring the Back 40 from Otis Lee Whitlock to Dale Robert Whitlock and Caleb Otis Whitlock as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I read that line 3 times. I had to. Dale Robert Whitlock and Caleb Otis Whitlock. I was born in 2005. The deed was dated 1989. That couldn't be right. Then I looked at the date again. June 8, 1989. And I realized Otis Whitlock had transferred the Back 40 to my father and to a son who hadn't been born yet, which meant the deed couldn't be naming me. It had to be naming someone else. Caleb Otis Whitlock, my uncle, my father's older brother, who I'd never heard of, who I'd never been told existed, whose name I had been given. The third folder was labeled Caleb Otis Whitlock S.R. Death 1991. Inside was a death certificate. Caleb Otis Whitlock Sr., born 1960, died February 14, 1991, age 30. Cause of death, motor vehicle accident, single vehicle, State Road 54, Marion County. He had died unmarried, with no children. Under intestate succession, his half of the Back 40 had passed in full to the surviving joint tenant, my father, under the right of survivorship. I sat with that for a long time. My father had named me after his dead older brother. He had never told me. Lenora had never told me. Nobody had ever told me. There was a man named Caleb whose name I was carrying, and my father had loved him enough to give me his name and never speak him out loud. The fourth folder was labeled Deed, Back 40, Transfer 2010. Inside was a third quitclaim deed, dated March 17th, 2010, 3 months after my 5th birthday, 6 months after my mother died. Grantor, Dale Robert Whitlock, a widower. Grantee, Caleb Otis Whitlock, a minor, by and through his guardian Dale Robert Whitlock. My father had transferred the Back 40, all 40 acres of it, into my name when I was 5 years old. Solely, not jointly, not with him retaining any interest. Into my name. He had recorded the transfer at the Marion County Recorder's office. There was a stamp. There was a recording number. It was real. He had done it. I realized 6 months after my mother died, before he married Lenora. He had quietly, legally, irrevocably moved the most valuable 40 acres of the family farm, the Back 40, the bottomland, the piece with the spring, out of his own estate and into mine, while I was a 5-year-old child who did not even know the word deed. The fifth folder was labeled Mineral Rights, Back 40, 2018. Inside was a recorded mineral lease, dated May 2018, between Caleb Otis Whitlock, a minor by and through his guardian Dale Robert Whitlock, and a company called Wabash Energy Partners. The lease covered all subsurface rights, oil, gas, and minerals, under the Back 40. The signing bonus had been $187,000. The royalty rate was 18%. The lease had been paid in full and was an act of production. There was a copy of a bank statement clipped to the back of the folder. A trust account at First Farmers Bank of Linton, Indiana. Account holder, Caleb Otis Whitlock. Irrevocable trust, Dale R. Whitlock trustee. Balance, as of August 31st, 3 weeks before my father died, for $131,847.22. The sixth folder was labeled Survey, 2024. Inside was a recent surveyor's report, dated June of this year, 3 months before my father died. It had been commissioned by Dale Whitlock and conducted by a licensed surveyor named Aaron Mickelberg out of Bloomfield. The survey confirmed the boundaries of the back 40, the location of the active gas wells, the route of the access road, and one more thing, that the spring on the back 40, the one my father had shown me when I was a boy, was the source of the surface water for the entire lower farm, including the 4-acre home parcel, including the house Lenora had inherited, including the pasture Mr. Pate's company was currently in the process of buying from her for residential development. In other words, every drop of water that touched Lenora's land came up out of the ground on mine. The 7 folder was labeled simply for Caleb. Inside was a single document, a letter 3 pages long, in my father's blocky handwriting. I read it through once, sitting on that milk crate, with the bulb humming overhead and the smell of pipe tobacco in the air, and I did not move when I finished. I want to share the part that mattered most. Son, he wrote, your grandfather Otis cleared that back 40 with a team of mules in his own 2 hands, and he lost a brother and a finger doing it. And he told me the day he handed the deed to me and your Uncle Caleb. He said, this land does not belong to a Whitlock. A Whitlock belongs to it. We are stewards. The minute we forget that, the land will go to somebody who does not know its name. When your mother died, I knew something had broken in me. I was not strong enough to be alone. I knew I was going to make a mistake about a woman, and I knew Otis's land was at risk. And so, before I made that mistake, I made one good decision. I put the back 40 in your name. I told no one. I did not tell Hollis Tremblay, who handled the rest of my affairs. I used a different lawyer for that one transaction, a man in Bloomington who has since passed away. The deed is recorded. It is bulletproof. Lenora does not know. Trent and Jaden do not know. The development company does not know. Whatever Lenora has signed or is in the process of signing, she has signed only the home parcel and the upper pastures. She does not have the right to sell what she does not own. The back 40 and the spring and every dollar of mineral royalty that has come out of it for the last 6 years is yours and has always been yours. I could not tell you in life because if I had, Lenora would have made our lives, your life, into something I could not bear. She would have contested. She would have litigated. She would have pressed you and pressured you while you were a child. She would have made you choose, and you should not have to choose because there is no choice. The land was Otis's, and now it is yours, and a Whitlock belongs to it. The trust account is yours. The royalties are yours. I am sorry I was not a better father in the visible ways. I tried to be one in the ways that would last. One last thing. Marlene Sayers, the county recorder, is your grandfather Otis's second cousin. She knew your Uncle Caleb. She has known about the 2010 transfer the whole time and has kept it quiet at my request. Go to her. She has a sealed envelope for me in her office safe. She will know what to do. Be steady, son. Do not be cruel. The land does not require cruelty. It requires only that the truth be told. Tell it plainly and let it do its work. Dad, I sat on that milk crate for a very long time. I do not remember crying, although I must have. I remember at some point opening the small green safe on my mother's birthday, the digits coming back to me from somewhere I'd forgotten I kept them, and finding inside it my mother's wedding ring. A photograph of my father holding me on the day I was born, with my Uncle Caleb standing beside him, both of them grinning. A second copy, notarized, of every document in the accordion file, and a single business card, paper clipped to the inside of the lid. Marlene Sayers, Marion County Recorder, Linton, Indiana. Halfway through the night, I want to say something to you directly. If this story is moving you, hit the like button and turn on the bell so you never miss another story like this one. I tell these stories because I think we forget sometimes how often the quiet ones are the ones who were watching the most carefully. How often the man who wouldn't say I love you at the dinner table was behind closed doors doing the most careful, patient, decade-long work of love a person can do. Stay with me. The hardest part is still ahead. I closed the unit at 2 a.m. I drove out to the back 40 in the dark. I parked at the gate and walked the line the way my father had taught me. East along the fence, then south, then west. The moon was up. I came to the southeast corner post, the one Otis had set in 1962, and I put my hand on it. The wood was old and soft, and the corner pin was still there, a little iron rod sunk in the soil with a brass cap. I stood there for a long time. I could hear, somewhere off to the northwest, the soft mechanical hum of the gas wells. My gas wells, I realized. My land. My grandfather's hands had cleared it. My father had hidden inside my name like a man hiding a pearl inside a shell. And now I was standing on it. I drove back to town. I slept 4 hours in the Buick, in the parking lot of the courthouse. At 8 a.m., when the doors opened, I was the first person inside. Section 5, the recorder. Marlene Sayers was in her late 60s, a small woman with iron gray hair cut short and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. Her office was in the basement of the Marion County Courthouse, behind a counter with a frosted glass window. When I told her my name, she looked up from her keyboard, and her hand went very slowly to her mouth. "You're Caleb," she said. "Otis's grandson." "Yes, ma'am," I said. She came around the counter, and she looked at me for a long moment, and she said, "You have your Uncle Caleb's eyes. Your daddy was right. You've got the Whitlock eyes." And then she opened the half door, and she let me into the back office, the one nobody but the staff was supposed to enter, and she sat me down at a wooden table with a green shaded lamp, and she went to a small fireproof safe in the corner, and she dialed a combination, and she took out a plain manila envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. "He left this with me 3 years ago," she said. "He told me, the day he brought it in. He said, 'Marlene, if I die before my boy is grown, you sit on this. You don't tell Hollis. You don't tell anybody. And when Caleb comes through that door, you give it to him, and you help him do what needs to be done.' And I said, 'Dale, I will, and I have.' And here you are." I opened the envelope. Inside was a sheaf of papers, copies of every recorded document already in the accordion file, plus a notarized affidavit from my father, dated 3 years prior, attesting under oath to the chain of title, the trust, the mineral lease, and his intent. There was also a letter from a Bloomington attorney named Edna Crawford, deceased, the lawyer who had handled the 2010 transfer, testifying to the same. And there was one more document I had not seen before, a notice of pending sale, filed by a company called Heartland Acreage Holdings, dated 2 weeks earlier, attempting to record a purchase option on 146 acres of farmland, including, mistakenly, the back 40. Marlene tapped that notice with one finger. "They tried to record this last week," she said. Asterisk, I rejected it. I cited a chain of title objection, which is technically my prerogative as recorder. Your stepmother's lawyer called me twice this week, trying to find out why. I told him it was a clerical issue, and he should resubmit. He has not yet resubmitted, because he cannot. Because the back 40 is not your stepmother's to sell. And the surface estate of the back 40 controls the water rights of the entire lower farm, which means, technically, legally, asterisk, and she leaned forward over the table and looked at me over her reading glasses. Your stepmother does not have the right to sell the lower farm without your written consent as the dominant water rights holder. I sat there. I let it land. Mr. Pate's company, she went on, is going to figure this out within about another week. Probably less. Their title company is going to run the deeds, and they're going to come up against your name on the back 40. And they're going to come up against the spring, and the deal is going to fall apart. Your stepmother is going to receive a letter from her own lawyer, probably within 10 business days, telling her that the sale cannot close as structured. She is going to be very angry. She is going to want to know how this happened. She is going to want to know who you talked to. Asterisk, and what I would like to suggest, son, asterisk, and now she took her glasses off and folded them carefully on the table, is that we get out in front of it. I would like to suggest that we record the affidavit your father left with me and the chain of title documents this morning before lunch. I would like to suggest that we file a notice of beneficial interest on your behalf with the county. And I would like to suggest, if you'll allow me, that I call a lawyer I know, a woman named Patrice Donnelly, who is not Hollis Tremblay and is not your stepmother's lawyer and is, in my professional opinion, the best property attorney in 3 counties. I would like her to be in this office with us by 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I would like, by the end of the day, for there to be no possible question on any title search anywhere in the state of Indiana about whose land that back 40 is. Would that be acceptable to you, Caleb? I said yes. I want you to know that I said it without hesitation, but my hands were shaking, and Marlene saw, and she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, and she said, "Your daddy did a good thing here. He was a quiet man, and he was not always brave the way you wanted him to be. But this he was brave about. You hold on to that." We recorded the documents at 11:47 a.m. Patrice Donnelly arrived at 3:38 with a paralegal and a leather portfolio. By 6 o'clock that evening, the Marion County Records Office had on file a confirmed chain of title on 40 acres of farmland in my name, a notice of beneficial interest in surface water rights affecting the adjacent 106 acres, and a formal letter hand-delivered to Heartland Acreage Holdings and to Hollis Tremblay, notifying both parties of the agricultural acreage being negotiated for sale was subject to an undisclosed encumbrance, and that the sale, as currently structured, could not proceed. At 6:30 p.m., Patrice Donnelly placed a phone call to Lenora Whitlock's lawyer, a man named Bryce Henning out of Indianapolis. The conversation lasted 19 minutes. I was sitting in the office while she took it. I could not hear his side. I could only hear hers, calm, polite, devastating. When she hung up, she looked at me. "They want to meet," she said. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at Hollis Tremblay's office. Lenora, Trent, Jaden, Mr. Pate, and their lawyer. They are asking that you and I be present." I told them we would be. I nodded. "Caleb," she said, "I want you to understand what's about to happen. Your stepmother is about to discover that everything she has done over the past 4 weeks, the sale, the will, the inheritance she has been operating on the assumption of, is built on a piece of ground that was never hers. She is going to be very angry. She is going to look for someone to blame. She is going to try, at first, to intimidate you. When that doesn't work, she is going to try to negotiate. When that doesn't work, she is going to try to threaten litigation. And when that doesn't work, and I want you to hear me on this, she is going to break. Are you ready for that?" "No, ma'am," I said. She smiled. "Good answer," she said. "The ones who say yes usually aren't." Section 6, the meeting. I didn't sleep that night. I drove back out to back 40, and I parked at the gate, and I sat on the hood of the Buick, and I watched the sun come up over my grandfather's land. The fog lifted off the bottom around 6. A heron came down out of the trees by the spring and stood in the shallow water for a long time, perfectly still, and then took off again. I want to be honest with you. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt mostly sad. I felt sad that my father had carried this alone for 13 years. I felt sad that he had not been able to tell me, that he had not been able to stand at the Sunday dinner table and say, "This is my son, and this is his land." I felt sad that he had been a coward in the small ways, and a hero only in the legal documents nobody could see. I felt sad for the years. At 10 o'clock, I walked into Hollis Tremblay's office with Patrice Donnelly beside me. Lenora was already there. Trent and Jaden flanked her. Mr. Pate was at the end of the table, with a thick folder. Bryce Henning, Lenora's lawyer, was at the far side, and Hollis Tremblay was at the head of the table, looking, I thought, considerably older than he had the day before. He nodded at me. I think he had figured most of it out by then. Lenora started the meeting. "Caleb," she said, "I don't know what story you've told these people, but I want to be clear that the will reading was binding, and any games you're trying to play here today are going to—" Patrice held up one finger. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said very politely, "I'm going to ask that we let the documents speak first. After we've reviewed them, you will have ample opportunity to respond. May I?" Lenora's mouth tightened. She nodded. Patrice opened her portfolio and began, document by document, to walk the table through the chain of title. The 1962 deed to Otis. The 1989 transfer to Dale and Caleb Sr. The 1991 death certificate and right of survivorship. The 2010 transfer to me. Recorded, Patrice said, 14 years ago, in this very office. She slid a copy of the recording to Hollis Tremblay, who took it and put on his reading glasses and read it and did not look up for a long time. She walked them through the mineral lease, the trust account, the 2024 surveyor's report, the water rights. About 6 minutes in, Trent made a sound. A small, choke sound, like a man who has just been hit in the stomach. He turned to his mother. "Mom," he said, Mom, what is she? Be quiet, Trent, Lenora said, but her voice had changed. It had gone tight. The polish was gone out of it. She was looking at the documents the way a person looks at a photograph of a fire in their own house. When Patrice got to the water rights, when she explained, in plain English, that every drop of surface water on the lower farm came up out of a spring on land that belonged to me, Mr. Pate set down his pen. He looked at Bryce Henning. He looked at Lenora. He looked at me. He said very quietly, Mrs. Whitlock, I'm going to need to step out and call my legal team. I don't believe we can close on this property under these conditions. He left. He did not come back. Lenora's face went white, then red, then slowly a kind of papery gray. I watched it happen. I want to tell you I felt something like satisfaction, and I did not. I felt only a terrible, quiet pity, because the woman across the table from me had just realized, in the space of 10 minutes, that the financial future she had been building for herself and her 2 sons, the future she had purchased in part with my childhood, was made of paper, and the wind had come. She turned to me. How long? She said. How long have you known? 2 days, I said. 2 days, she repeated, and then she laughed. It was a terrible laugh. It was a laugh of a person who had just understood that the man she'd been married to for 10 years had, the entire time, been quietly placing pieces on a board she didn't know she was playing on. 2 days. Your father knew for 13 years, I said. He told no one, not even me. He filed the deed when I was 5. She put her hands flat on the table. Her wedding ring caught the light. I watched her stare at it. I watched something inside her give way. I had never, in 10 years of living under her roof, seen Lenora Whitlock cry. She did not cry now, exactly. She did something worse. She made the small, animal sound a person makes when they realize the story they have been telling themselves for a decade is not the story that was actually being lived. He never trusted me, she said. To no one. To the room. To Dale, perhaps, wherever he was. He never, all those years, he didn't trust you with this, I said. He was right not to. It was the first hard thing I had said in the meeting. Patrice glanced at me. I want to tell you, I regretted it. I will be honest. I did not. Trent was crying now, quietly, into his sleeve. Jaden was staring at the table, very still, the way a man stares when he is trying to recalculate every assumption he has ever made about his own life. I want to be clear with you. I did not feel sorry for Trent and Jaden. They had stood by while their mother worked, year after year, to make me feel like a stranger in my father's house. They had laughed when I cried at 12 years old over a Christmas list with 3 names. They had been complicit, in the small, careless way that adolescents are complicit in their parents' cruelties. But I did feel something for Lenora in that moment. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Something more like recognition. Because I saw, looking at her, that she had built her life on the assumption that my father did not love me, that I was, as she had once said in my face when I was 11, a thing he had to take care of, not a thing he chose. And the documents in front of her on Hollis Tremblay's table were, in their quiet legal way, the most public possible refutation of that assumption. He had not just chosen me. He had chosen me 13 years ago in secret and built a wall around my future with his own 2 hands while she slept in the bed beside him. She had been wrong. For 13 years, about the thing she had been most certain of. There is a particular kind of grief in that. I saw it on her face. What do you want? Caleb, she said. Finally, her voice was flat, defeated. Just tell me what you want. And I want you to know that I had thought about this. I had sat on the hood of the Buick that morning at sunrise, and I had thought about what my father had written. Be steady, son. Do not be cruel. The land does not require cruelty. It requires only that the truth be told. I told her what I wanted. Part 3. Transformation and Gestation Section 7. The new stewardship. What I wanted, I told them, was simple. I would take possession of the back 40, which was already legally mine. I would continue the existing mineral lease with Wabash Energy Partners. The trust account at First Farmers Bank would transfer in full to me upon my 18th birthday, which had already passed. For the remaining 106 acres of farmland, the upper pastures and the lower farm, the land that had legally come to Lenora through my father's will, I would not contest the inheritance. The will was the will. My father had made his choices. But because the surface water on every acre of that land originated on my 40, and because no buyer in their right mind would close on land without confirmed water rights, any future sale of those 106 acres would require my written agreement on the water rights question. And what I was going to require, I told her, was this. First, the back 40 would never be sold. Not by me, not by my heirs. I would put it into a perpetual agricultural conservation easement with the state of Indiana, restricting the surface estate to farming and conservation use in perpetuity. A Whitlock belongs to the land, I said, looking at Lenora, not the other way around. My grandfather said that. I'm holding to it. Second, the upper pastures and the lower farm, Lenora's 106 acres, could be sold as she wished, but only as working farmland, to a working farmer at fair market value for agricultural use, not to a residential developer, not to Heartland Acreage Holdings or any company like them. The land would stay in agriculture. The water on my 40 would not feed 100 new vacation cabins. It would feed crops and cattle, and the families that worked them. Third, the farmhouse and the home parcel would remain Lenora's, free and clear. I had no claim on them and would make none. She could live there until she died. Trent and Jaden could inherit it from her. I had no quarrel with that. The house was hers. I did not want it. I had not lived in it happily, and I did not want to live in it now. Fourth, I wanted one thing back. From the boxes in the storage unit, I had recovered most of what I cared about. My mother's hope chest, the photographs, the things my father had saved. But there had been a photograph that used to hang in the kitchen of my grandfather Otis with his Transit, the one Lenora had taken down when I was 7. I wanted that photograph. I wanted it back on a wall in a house I lived in. I would want to know that picture was somewhere it could be seen. Lenora reached up and touched her pearls. She did not look at me. It's in the attic, she said. In a box. I'll send it. Thank you, I said. I told them, finally, that I was not going to pursue any further legal action. I was not going to sue. I was not going to file anything. I was not going to make a scene. The documents had spoken. The land had spoken. There was nothing more I needed to win, because nothing more had been taken from me that the law could give back. What had been taken? The years, the silence, the small daily cruelties of childhood lived as an inconvenience. Those were gone, and no court could restore them, and I was not going to spend my adult life trying to litigate a wound. I wanted to be free of it. I wanted to be free of her. The simplest path to that freedom was to take what was mine, leave her with what was hers, and walk out of the building. Patrice Donnelly drew up the agreement that afternoon. Bryce Henning reviewed it and made 2 small changes. Lenora signed it at 4 p.m. Her hand was steady when she signed. Trent and Jaden did not sign. They were not parties, but they witnessed it. Hollis trembly notarized it. When it was done, Lenora stood up. She gathered her purse. She did not look at me. At the door, she paused, and without turning, she said, "I will send the photograph." "Thank you," I said again. She left. Trent followed her, eyes on the floor. Jaden was the last out. He stopped at the door, and for the first time in our lives, he looked me in the face, really looked, and he said, "I didn't know about any of it. The deed, the trust, none of it." He paused. "That doesn't fix anything." "I know it doesn't. But I didn't know, Caleb." "I believe you," I said. It was not forgiveness. We both understood that. It was an opening of a door that we might, or might not, walk through someday. He nodded once and left. I sat in Hollis Tremblay's office for a long time after they were gone. Patrice was packing up her portfolio. Marlene Sayers had come over from the courthouse for the signing and was sitting in a chair by the window with her glasses off and her eyes closed. Hollis Tremblay cleared his throat and looked at me and said, "Son, your father." He stopped. He started again. "Your father was a better man than I knew. I want to apologize to you. I knew there were things in that family that were not right. I should have asked. I did not ask. It's all right, Mr. Tremblay," I said. "He didn't want you to know. He was protecting you, too, from having to choose." He nodded slowly. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I am going to retire next year," he said. "I think it is time. I think it has been time for a while." I drove out to the back 40 that evening. I parked at the gate. I walked the line again, the way my father had taught me. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other stories on screen right now.